The moment the sirens boxed me in, I thought it was a mistake, until an officer screamed that my car was stolen and aimed his gun at my chest. In the back of that cruiser, shaking and humiliated, I learned the truth. My own sister had reported me, not because she believed it, but because she wanted me labeled unstable, unfit, and unworthy of what our father left behind. The phone call that ended my life as I knew it came on a Tuesday afternoon, right in the middle of a billing dispute with an insurance company. I was sitting in my glass-walled office at the Larkhaven Medical Center, staring at a denial code for a routine MRI, when my cell phone buzzed against the hard laminate of my desk. The screen flashed the name of a neighbor I had not spoken to in 3 years. I knew before I answered, there is a specific gravity to calls that come from the past in the middle of a workday. Gideon Hayes was dead. My father. The man who had been both an anchor and a millstone around the neck of our family for as long as I could remember. When I hung up, I did not cry. I sat there listening to the hum of the server rack in the closet behind me and the polite murmuring of the receptionists outside. I felt a cold, spreading numbness, followed immediately by a shameful, quiet wash of relief. It was the feeling of a heavy door finally clicking shut, the years of quiet tension, the walking on eggshells, the cryptic emails, and the silent treatments were over. I told my staff I would be gone for a week. I packed a suitcase with black slacks and sensible blouses. I drove my dark blue sedan, a car I had bought and paid for with my own salary 3 years ago, out of Larkhaven and onto the interstate. The drive took 4 hours. I spent the entire time rehearsing what I would say to Marin. My sister Marin was 2 years younger than me, but she had always possessed a terrifying sort of magnetism. She was the one who broke things and convinced you that you had pushed her. She was the one who borrowed money and made you feel guilty for asking for it back. We had not spoken since Christmas, a conversation that had ended with her hanging up on me because I refused to co-sign a loan for a boutique business that existed only on a heavy cardstock brochure. I checked into a budget hotel on the edge of town rather than going to the family house. I needed a fortress. I needed a door that locked. The reading of the will took place 2 days later at the law offices of Russell Klein. The building was an old Victorian conversion that smelled of lemon polish and decaying paper. Russell Klein had been my father's attorney for 20 years, a man who always looked like he was wearing a suit that was one size too large for his shrinking frame. When I walked into the conference room, Marin was already there. She was wearing a black dress that fit her perfectly, perhaps a little too perfectly for a grieving daughter. Her hair was swept back, her makeup flawless. She did not look like a woman who had just lost her father. She looked like a woman who was waiting for a ribbon-cutting ceremony. "Hello, Eleanor," she said. Her voice was smooth, devoid of any jagged edges. "Hello, Marin," I replied, taking the seat furthest from her. Russell Klein shuffled in, looking harried. He wiped sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief that had seen better days. He sat at the head of the heavy mahogany table and opened a thick file. The reading was standard, or at least it seemed so at first. The house, the accounts, the meager investments, it was all to be poured into something called the Hayes Family Trust. I listened, trying to parse the legal jargon. My father had never mentioned a trust. He had always been a cash and ledger man, suspicious of banks, suspicious of lawyers, suspicious of the government. As Russell read through the distribution clauses, I watched Marin. She was not listening to him. She was staring at the documents spread out on the table. Slowly, discreetly, she slid her phone from her lap. I watched her thumb hover over the shutter button. She was taking pictures of the upside-down pages in front of Russell. She looked up and caught my eye. She did not look away. She smiled, a small, tight expression that did not reach her eyes. It was a look of triumph. Russell finished reading. The gist was vague. The assets were held in the trust, to be distributed at the discretion of the executor based on the beneficiaries demonstrating stability and moral standing. "Who is the executor?" I asked. Russell cleared his throat. "Your sister, Marin, is named as the primary executor." I felt the blood drain from my face. Marin? Marin. Who had 5 different addresses in 6 years? Marin. Who owed money to half the town? Father felt Marin needed the responsibility to ground her. Russell said, avoiding my gaze, he looked at his papers, and he felt you were independent enough to handle the oversight role. Oversight? I asked. You have the right to request an accounting, Russell said, but the administration is entirely within Marin's purview. Marin stood up. Smoothing her dress, I think that went very well, she said. Russell, I will be by tomorrow to pick up the keys to the property. Eleanor, I assume you are staying at a hotel? I am, I said, standing up. My legs felt heavy. Good, Marin said. The house is a mess. You would hate it. She walked out without hugging me. She did not even shake my hand. I left the office 10 minutes later. My head swimming, I needed to think. I walked to my car. The blue sedan parked on the street. I got in and gripped the steering wheel, breathing in the smell of my own car air freshener. Vanilla and pine. It was the only space in this town that felt like mine. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb. I decided to go back to the hotel, change my clothes, and find a place to get coffee where I could read the copy of the will Russell had given me. I was 3 blocks away from the law office, turning onto the main avenue that led toward the highway on-ramp. When I saw the blue lights in my rearview mirror, my stomach dropped. I checked my speedometer. I was going 5 miles under the limit. I checked my seatbelt. It was fastened. I pulled over to the right shoulder. Engaging my turn signal, the police cruiser behind me did not just pull up. It swerved aggressively, stopping at an angle that blocked my rear bumper. Then a second cruiser screeched to a halt in front of me, cutting off my exit. Confusion washed over me. This had to be a mistake. Maybe they were chasing someone else? I put the car in park and looked out my window. The driver's side door of the rear cruiser flew open. An officer stepped out. He was not walking toward me with a ticket book. He was crouching behind his open door, his weapon drawn and leveled at my head. "Driver!" The voice boomed over a PA system. "Put your hands out the window, now!" The world tilted. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the black barrel of the gun. This was not happening. I was a medical office manager. I paid my taxes. I had never even had a speeding ticket. "Driver, hands out the window. Do it now, or we will engage." I scrambled to roll the window down, my fingers shaking so violently I missed the button twice. The glass slid down. I thrust my hands out into the cold afternoon air, spreading my fingers wide. "With your left hand, open the door from the outside. Keep your right hand visible." I reached down, fumbling for the handle. I popped the door open. "Step out." "Slowly. Face away from us. Walk backward." I stepped out onto the asphalt. My knees were water. I could hear the traffic stopped on the other side of the median. I could see people on the sidewalk stopping, pointing. A woman in a jogging suit held up her phone. The camera lens, a black eye, fixed on my shame. I walked backward, my heels clicking on the road. "Drop to your knees. Cross your ankles. Hands on your head." I sank to the gritty pavement. The rocks dug into my shins through my slacks. I interlaced my fingers behind my head, bowing forward. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears leaking out. "Please don't shoot me," I whispered. "Please don't shoot me." Rough hands grabbed my wrists. They wrenched my arms behind my back. The metal of the handcuffs bit into my skin. Tight, ratcheting down until the bone ached. "You are hurting me," I gasped. "Stop resisting." A voice barked in my ear. I was hauled to my feet. I was spun around and slammed against the side of the police cruiser. An officer patted me down, his hands moving impersonally and aggressively over my ribs, my waist, my pockets. He pulled out my wallet and my phone. "What is going on?" I cried, my voice cracking. "That is my car." "We have a report of a stolen vehicle," the officer said. He was young, red-faced, adrenaline pumping off him in waves. "That is impossible," I said. "I bought that car 3 years ago. The title is in my name." The officer ignored me. He shoved me into the back of the cruiser. The hard plastic seat was cold. The cage between us was a grid of steel mesh. I watched through the window as they searched my car. They were pulling things out of the glove box, tossing my insurance papers on the passenger seat. I sat there for 20 minutes, humiliated, terrified, watching the bystanders film me. I was a criminal to them. I was a thief. I was dangerous. Finally, the officer opened the back door. His demeanor had changed. The aggression was gone, replaced by a sullen annoyance. He uncuffed me. I rubbed my wrists. There were red welts where the metal had been. "Is the registration Eleanor Hayes?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I am Eleanor Hayes." He sighed and handed me my wallet. "Dispatch confirmed the VIN. It matches your registration." "Why did you think it was stolen?" I asked, my voice trembling with a rage that was beginning to replace the fear. "We got a call this morning," he said, "reported stolen from the residence of Gideon Hayes. Caller stated the vehicle was taken without permission by a family member who was unauthorized to drive it." "Who called?" I asked, though the ice in my veins told me I already knew. The report was filed by Marin Hayes. The world stopped spinning and settled into a sharp, crystalline focus. "Marin, she claimed you took the keys from the house and fled." The officer said, "She said you were emotionally unstable." I stared at him. "The car has been in my name for 3 years. I drove it here from Larkhaven. I have the title in my safety deposit box." The officer shrugged. "We have to treat a stolen vehicle report as a felony stop, ma'am. Especially when the caller indicates the suspect might be erratic, you are free to go." He walked away. He did not apologize. He got in his car and drove off, leaving me standing on the roadside with my car door open and my papers strewn across the seat. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, shaking. I was not shaking from fear anymore. I was shaking from a cold, focused realization. This was not a prank. This was not Marin being petty. Marin knew the car was mine. She knew I had the registration. She knew the police would eventually figure it out. So why do it? I replayed the timeline, the will reading, the stability clause in the trust, the executor's discretion. If I had resisted, if I had panicked, if I had reached for my phone too quickly, I would have been arrested, charged with resisting, maybe worse. I would have a criminal record. I would be on the evening news. And a criminal record would be proof of instability. It would be grounds for the executor, Marin, to deny my distribution from the trust. She had not tried to get my car back. She had tried to get me a felony record. She had tried to destroy my life to secure her control over the money. I started the car. My hands were steady now. I drove back to the hotel. I did not speed. I used every signal. I came to a complete stop at every sign. When I got to my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and dialed Marin's number. She answered on the second ring. "Hello?" Her voice was light, airy, sweet. "You called the police." I said, "Eleanor? What are you talking about? You reported my car stolen." "Marin, I was pulled over at gunpoint. I was handcuffed on the side of the road." There was a pause, a silence that stretched just a little too long. "Oh, Eleanor," she sighed. "I was just so worried. You left in such a rush after the meeting. I looked in the driveway and the sedan was gone, and I just panicked. You know how people in grief do irrational things. I just wanted to make sure you were safe. You told them I stole it." I said, "You told them I was unstable." "I said I was worried you were not yourself," Marin corrected gently. "And honestly, calling me like this, sounding so paranoid, it proves I was right to be concerned. You sound unhinged. Maybe you should lie down. Don't do this." "Marin," I said, "do what? Look out for my big sister? Go get some sleep." "Eleanor, we have the funeral in 2 days. You need to look presentable." She hung up. I stared at the phone. She was gaslighting me. She was rewriting reality in real time, creating a narrative where she was the concerned saint and I was the volatile problem. I stood up and went to the closet to hang up my coat. I stopped. My suitcase was on the luggage rack. I had left it zipped closed. Now, the zipper was open 2 inches. I walked over to the desk. I had left a folder there, a manila folder containing the obituary draft and the funeral home brochures. The folder was gone. I looked around the room. The housekeeper? No, the housekeeping cart was at the other end of the hall when I came in. The bed was made, but the pillows were slightly askew, as if someone had lifted them to look underneath. My heart hammered against my ribs. Someone had been in my room. I checked my laptop bag. My computer was there, but the power cord was wound differently than how I did it. I always looped it over my hand. This was folded in a zigzag. Marin, or someone Marin knew. She wasn't just trying to get me arrested. She was hunting for something. I sat down in the desk chair, feeling the walls closing in. What was she looking for? What did she think I had? I closed my eyes and tried to summon my father's voice. Gideon Hayes was a difficult man, a secretive man. He kept everything in his head, or in places no one would look. And then I remembered the email. It was from 6 months ago. I had dismissed it at the time as one of his paranoid ramblings, likely induced by too much scotch and late-night Fox News. I opened my laptop and logged into my email. I searched for Gideon. There it was. Subject line, garden maintenance. I opened it. The body of the email was about the azaleas in the front yard, rambling about soil pH and pruning shears. But at the very bottom, separated by a dozen blank lines, was a single sentence. If anything happens, don't trust the paperwork. Trust the ledger. I stared at the words on the glowing screen. Don't trust the paperwork, the will, the trust, the documents Marin was photographing. Trust the ledger. I did not know what ledger he meant. I did not know where it was. But I knew one thing. Marin was terrified of something. She was terrified enough to file a false police report. She was terrified enough to break into my hotel room. She wanted me to leave. She wanted me to break down, to run back to Larkhaven, to let her handle everything. I looked at my wrists, where the red marks from the handcuffs were fading into bruises. I was not going anywhere. I picked up the phone and called the front desk. I need to change rooms, I said, and I need to speak to your manager about who accessed my keycard. I hung up. I could not afford to grieve. Not yet. Grief was a luxury for people who were safe, and I was in the middle of a war zone. I took a screenshot of the email and saved it to a hidden cloud folder. Then I stood up and walked to the mirror. I looked at myself, pale, shaken, hair messy from the wind on the roadside. I splashed cold water on my face. I smoothed my hair. I put on fresh lipstick. If Marin wanted a fight, I would give her one, but I would not fight like her, with lies and hysteria. I would fight like my father. I would find the ledger. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. The police stop had been the opening shot. It was time to return fire. The morning after the incident on the roadside, I woke up with a headache that felt like a nail being driven slowly into the base of my skull. The cheap hotel curtains were drawn, but a sliver of aggressive sunlight cut across the room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the dead air. I lay there for a moment, listening to the trundle of housekeeping carts in the hallway, and remembered that I was essentially a fugitive in my own hometown. My first instinct was to flee, to pack my bag, get in my car, if the police didn't pull me over again, and drive until Larkhaven was a speck in the rearview mirror. But then I thought of the email. Don't trust the paperwork. And I thought of Marin's voice on the phone, that sickly sweet concern wrapping around a core of iron malice. I got up. I showered, scrubbing my skin until it was red, washing away the phantom sensation of the officer's hands. I dressed in the darkest clothes I had. A charcoal suit that I usually wore for firing people. It seemed appropriate. I needed to go to the house. The drive to the family estate was a journey through layers of memory I had tried to pave over. The house was a sprawling colonial set back from the road, surrounded by oaks that had been old when I was born. It was a house designed to impress, to intimidate, to hold secrets. I pulled into the driveway. My father's truck was gone. In its place was a white van with no windows and a magnetic decal on the side. North Pine Estate Services. I parked and walked to the front door. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was my home. I had grown up here. I had the right to be here. I slid my key into the lock. It stopped halfway. I frowned. Jiggling it, I pulled it out and tried again. The key would not seat. I crouched down and looked at the hardware. It was brand new, shiny brass, unmarred by scratches. The locks had been changed. I stood up, a flush of heat rising up my neck. I raised my hand to knock, but before my knuckles could graze the wood, the door opened. A man stood there. He was tall, thick-necked, wearing a polo shirt with the same North Pine logo as the van. He had a clipboard in one hand and a look of practiced, bored authority on his face. "Can I help you?" he asked. He did not move out of the doorway. "I am Eleanor Hayes," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "This is my father's house. Why doesn't my key work?" "Ms. Hayes?" he said, glancing down at his clipboard as if checking a list. "Right. We were told you might stop by. I am sorry about the inconvenience. The executor ordered the locks changed yesterday. Security concerns." "Security concerns?" I repeated. "I am his daughter. The executor is the legal authority on the property." "Ma'am," he said. He sounded like a recording. "We are just the caretakers. North Pine Estate Services has been contracted to secure the assets and inventory the contents. I want to come in." I said, "I need to get my father's personal effects. I need my things that are still here." He hesitated, then stepped back slightly. Though he did not open the door fully. "You can come in, but I have to escort you, and the study is off limits." "Why?" I asked, stepping over the threshold. The house smelled stale, like old dust and lemon polish. It felt cold. The thermostat likely turned down to save money. "Inventory," he said. "We are cataloging the financial records. Strict chain of custody. No one goes in or out until we are done." I walked past him into the foyer. The house looked wrong. The furniture was there, but it felt staged. The mail on the side table was gone. The rug was slightly askew. I walked toward the living room, but my eyes darted toward the hallway that led to my father's study. The door was closed. A piece of blue painter's tape was stuck across the frame and the door. A crude seal. "I am going to get a glass of water." I lied, and walked briskly toward the kitchen, which gave me a line of sight down the back corridor. The study door was not just taped, it was locked. But through the transoms, the glass panels above the doors that my father loved, I could see that the lights were on. I turned and saw the caretaker watching me. He was not following me, but he was tracking me, his body angled to block the hallway. I walked into the living room, my father's desk. An antique roll top he kept in the corner for casual correspondence was open. I froze. The drawers had been pulled out. Stacks of papers were sitting on the surface, organized into neat piles. Utility bills, medical, junk, but the bottom drawer, the one where he kept the family photo albums and the old letters from my mother, was empty. "Where are the albums?" I asked, pointing at the gaping wooden mouth of the drawer. "Boxed up," the caretaker said, appearing behind me. "Everything is being consolidated for valuation." "Valuation?" I spun around. "You cannot value sentimental items. They have no market value. We inventory everything," he said. "Look, Ms. Hayes, if you want to grab a coat or something, go ahead. But you cannot touch the papers. You cannot open any boxes, and you cannot go into the secured rooms." I looked at him. He was a wall of meat and bureaucracy. He did not care about my grief. He was being paid to keep me out. "Marin hired you?" I asked. "Ms. Marin Hayes signed the contract." "Yes. When?" "I am not at liberty to discuss the contract details." I walked over to the mantel. There was a picture of me and Marin as teenagers, standing on the porch. I reached out and took it. "Hey," the caretaker said, stepping forward. I turned on him. The frame clutched to my chest. "Try to stop me," I whispered. "Just try it. I will call the police and tell them you are stealing property from the estate." He stopped. He looked at the frame, then at me. He shrugged. "Fine. Take the picture. But that is it." I walked out of the house with the photo frame burning a hole in my hand. I did not look back. I felt sick. It wasn't just that Marin was locking me out. It was the efficiency of it. North Pine Estate Services, the changed locks, the inventory. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was a mobilized operation. I got back in my car and drove straight to Russell Klein's office. I did not have an appointment. I did not care. The receptionist, a woman named Beverly who had known me since I was 12, looked up with a start when I stormed in. "Eleanor," she said, her hand fluttering to her throat, "we weren't expecting you. I need to see Russell." I said, "Now. He is on a conference call." She began, but I was already walking past her desk. I pushed open the heavy oak door to his inner office. Russell was not on a conference call. He was sitting at his desk, staring at a wall of law books, shredding a styrofoam coffee cup into tiny white flakes. He jumped when I entered. "Eleanor, what is going on?" "Russell?" I demanded, slamming the door behind me. The sound echoed in the small room. He stood up, brushing the styrofoam snow from his lap. "Eleanor, please, you are upset. I understand. I went to my father's house and I was barred from entry by a bouncer in a polo shirt. I said, 'The locks are changed. The study is sealed.' You told me this was a straightforward estate. Since when does a simple will require a security team?" Russell sighed and gestured to the chair opposite him. "Please, sit down." I remained standing. "Marin feels, that is, the executor feels, that given the assets involved, it is prudent to secure the property," Russell said. He was sweating again. He refused to meet my eyes. "What assets?" I asked. "Dad had the house, the savings, and the retirement accounts. It's not the Rockefeller estate." "Russell, why is North Pine Estate Services involved? They are a reputable firm." Russell said quickly, too quickly, "They specialize in efficient liquidation and asset protection. I want to see the trust document." I said, "The full thing, not the summary you read yesterday. I want to see the specific language regarding the executor's powers and the definitions of stability." Russell shifted his weight. "Eleanor, you know I want to help you, but as the attorney for the estate, my duty is to the executor, your duty is to the decedent." I snapped, "My father. The client is the estate," Russell corrected, "and Marin is the representative of the estate. So you are saying I cannot see my own father's trust?" "I am saying," Russell said, picking his words with agonizing care, "that Marin has instructed me not to release further documentation without her written consent. She wants to ensure that interpretations are handled in a unified manner." "A unified manner?" I laughed, a harsh barking sound. "She had me arrested." "Russell, she reported my car stolen." "I heard about that," Russell said. He looked pained. "A misunderstanding. Surely, grief makes people do strange things." "It was not a misunderstanding," I shouted. "She lied to the police." Russell held up his hands. "Eleanor, please, lower your voice. Look, if you want to contest the executorship, that is your right. You can hire your own counsel, but I warn you, probate litigation is expensive. It is ugly, and it destroys families. Your father wanted peace. He wanted you two to work this out." "Did he?" I asked. "Or did he want you to do your job and protect his legacy?" Russell turned pale. "I am doing my job. Eleanor, now, I have another client coming in 10 minutes. I have to ask you to leave." I looked at him. I saw a man who was afraid. He wasn't just being difficult. He was being coerced, or bought. "I will leave," I said. "But this isn't over." "Russell," I walked out. My hands were shaking again. But this time it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. My next stop was the police station. The front desk was manned by a different officer than the one who had arrested me. I requested a copy of the incident report and the original call log. "You can't get the full investigation file," the clerk said, chewing gum loudly, "but since you are the subject, you can get the initial report." I paid the $10 fee and waited. 10 minutes later, she handed me a staple-bound packet. I took it to a bench outside the station and opened it. The narrative was clear. Reporting party, RP, states that suspect, sister, removed vehicle from premises without authorization. RP states, suspect has history of erratic behavior and may be a danger to herself or others. And there, at the bottom of the statement form, was the signature, Marin Hayes. Below the signature was a standard legal warning. I declare under penalty of perjury that the foregoing is true and correct. She had signed it. It wasn't just a frantic phone call. She had put it in writing. She had committed a crime to get me in trouble. But why take the risk? Unless she was absolutely certain I wouldn't fight back, or unless she believed the stability clause in the trust was worth more than the risk of a false report charge. I flipped the page to the dispatch log. 1402. Call received from RP, 1415. Unit 4 dispatched, 1435. Suspect vehicle located, and then a second entry, 1440. Second call received from RP. RP advises officers to exercise caution. RP states, suspect may be in possession of controlled substances. Request check of vehicle for narcotics. My blood ran cold. Controlled substances. That was why they had been so aggressive. That was why they had torn my car apart. Marin hadn't just wanted me stopped. She wanted me found with drugs. Did she plant something? Panic seized me. I had driven the car back to the hotel. I had not checked it thoroughly. I ran to my car, parked at the meter. I unlocked it and tore through the interior. I checked under the mats. I checked the crevices of the seats. I checked the spare tire well. Nothing. I sat back in the driver's seat, breathing hard. She hadn't planted anything. She didn't need to. She just needed the suspicion of it. She needed the police report to say, suspicion of narcotics, even if they found nothing. The accusation would be in the official record. Subject investigated for narcotics possession. It was a smear campaign weaponized by the state. I saw a police officer walking toward the station entrance. It was him, the young officer from yesterday. "Officer!" I called out. Jumping out of the car, he turned, recognizing me instantly. His posture stiffened. "Ma'am, I told you yesterday. You were free to go." "I am not here to complain," I said, holding up the report. "I just read the log. She called back and told you I had drugs?" The officer looked uncomfortable. He glanced around. "Look, I can't discuss the caller's statements beyond what is in the report. You drew a gun on me because of that call. Didn't you?" I asked. "You thought I was a drug addict. We have to take all advisories seriously," he said defensively. The RP was very specific. "She said you had a history of dependency. I have never touched a drug in my life." I said, "I manage a medical office. I pass a drug test every 6 months." He looked at me, really looked at me. For the first time, he saw the suit. He saw the desperation and the clarity in my eyes. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. "I shouldn't say this, but when we searched your car, it was clean. Cleaner than my own car. No residue, no paraphernalia, nothing. So you know she lied?" He shrugged. "People lie to us every day. Domestic disputes are messy. But ma'am, yes? Watch your back. The lady on the phone? She didn't sound scared. She sounded eager, like she was reading from a script." He turned and walked into the station. I stood there, clutching the report, eager. 2 days later was the funeral. It was held at the First Methodist Church. The same place I had been baptized, the same place my mother's funeral had been held 10 years ago. I arrived early, hoping to have a moment of quiet with the casket, but the room was already full. Marin was at the front, standing by the open casket. She looked ethereal. She was wearing a vintage black dress with a lace veil, something that looked like it belonged in a movie from the 1940s. She was holding a tissue to her nose, dabbing at eyes that were perfectly red-rimmed but not swollen. She was holding court. I walked down the center aisle. Heads turned. The whispering started immediately. It was a physical wave of sound, a low hiss of gossip. "That's her. The one who stole the car. I heard she was on drugs. Poor Marin." I kept my head high, staring straight ahead. I walked up to the casket. My father looked waxy and small. The undertaker had done a poor job. His mouth was set in a frown that didn't look like him. Gideon Hayes had been a stern man, but not a sour one. I reached out to touch his hand. "Eleanor," Marin whispered. I looked at her. "I am so glad you came," she said, loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear. I was afraid you wouldn't be up to it. I am fine. Marin, I said quietly. She reached out and hugged me. It was a trap. If I pulled away, I looked cold. If I hugged back, I was playing her game. I stood stiffly as she wrapped her arms around me. She smelled of expensive perfume and triumph. I forgive you, she whispered in my ear. Her voice was a razor blade wrapped in silk. For what? I hissed back. For being difficult, she said, pulling back and looking at me with big, sorrowful eyes. For making this week so hard on everyone, but we are family. We will get you the help you need. She turned to the crowd, wiping a tear. Thank you all for coming. Eleanor and I are so touched. I felt a hand on my arm. I turned to see Loretta Vance. Loretta was 70 years old. A woman who had been my mother's best friend and my father's confidant for 40 years. She wore a wool coat that had seen better decades and a hat with a bruised flower. Her face was a map of wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp, intelligent flint. Come sit with me. Ellie, she said. She led me to a pew in the second row, away from Marin's entourage. Ignore them, Loretta murmured as the organ music swelled. They only know what she tells them. She told them I am an addict. I whispered, she tells them a lot of things. Loretta said. She looked at the casket. Gideon knew. You know. Knew what? That she was drowning. That she would drag the house down with her to stay afloat. Loretta. I said, the will. The trust. It gives her everything. Why would he do that if he knew? Loretta kept her eyes forward. He didn't think he was giving her everything. He thought he was giving her a leash. He thought the restrictions would hold her. He didn't count on her finding a lawyer who could cut the leash. Who? Russell? Russell is a fool. Loretta scoffed. Marin has someone else now. I saw him at the hospital. A man in a gray suit. Slick. The music stopped. The minister began to speak. Loretta reached into her heavy handbag. She pulled out a handkerchief, and hidden inside the folds was a small, silver key. She pressed it into my hand. What is this? I whispered. Guest room closet, she breathed, barely moving her lips. Behind the bound copies of the National Geographic, the 1980 volume, there is a metal box. What is in it? The real records, Loretta said. Gideon told me 2 weeks ago, he said. If I die and Marin is smiling, tell Eleanor to find the box. She squeezed my hand. Do not let her see you take it, and for God's sake, do not tell Russell. The service blurred. I stood, I sat, I sang the hymns. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. Marin gave a eulogy that was a masterpiece of fiction, painting a portrait of a father who was entirely dependent on her loving care in his final months. After the burial, the reception was held at the house. I did not want to go. Every fiber of my being screamed to run. But I had the key, and the house was full of people. The caretaker couldn't stop me from entering with 50 mourners. I parked on the street, avoiding the driveway. I walked in with a group of neighbors. The house was crowded. People were eating ham sandwiches and drinking iced tea. Marin was in the living room. Accepting condolences, I made my way through the crowd. I nodded to people who looked away. I grabbed a glass of water to have a prop. I waited until Marin was deep in conversation with the minister. Then I slipped into the hallway. The study door was still taped. I ignored it. I went to the stairs. Where are you going? A voice asked. I froze. It was the North Pine caretaker. He was standing at the foot of the stairs. A sentinel. The bathroom. I said, the downstairs one is occupied. He looked at me suspiciously. He glanced at the bathroom door. It was indeed closed. Make it quick, he said. Upstairs is not for guests. I am not a guest, I said, and walked past him. I climbed the stairs, feeling his eyes on my back. I reached the landing and turned left, toward the guest room. I slipped inside and closed the door softly. I did not lock it. The click would be too loud. The room was dim. It smelled of lavender and disuse. I went to the closet. I opened it. It was filled with old coats and boxes of holiday decorations. I pushed aside a box of garlands and saw the bookshelf built into the back wall. It was crammed with books. Reader's Digest condensed novels, encyclopedias, and row after row of yellow-spined National Geographics. 1980. I scanned the dates. 78. 79. 80. I pulled the volume out. Behind it, recessed into the wall, was a small gray metal box, a cash box. I took the silver key from my pocket. My hands were trembling so bad I almost dropped it. I inserted the key. It turned with a smooth, heavy click. I opened the lid. Inside, there was no cash. There was a small, leather-bound book, a ledger. I opened it. It was my father's handwriting. Cramped, precise. January 12th. Deposit $5,000. Check. February 1st. Withdrawal $200. Cash. I flipped to the back. The dates were recent. From just a few weeks ago. March 10th. Transfer to credit union account B. $50,000. March 15th. North Pine contract presented by M. Refused to sign. I stared at the entry. Refused to sign. But the caretaker said there was a contract. I turned the page. There was a folded piece of notebook paper clipped to the back cover. I unfolded it. It was a note, written in shaky script, likely just days before he died. M is desperate. She is asking about the deed. She brought a man from the city. I do not trust Russell anymore. He is scared of them. If I die, M is not to touch the principal. The executor is compromised. I heard a footstep on the stairs. I slammed the box shut. I shoved the ledger into the waistband of my pantyhose, the only place I could hide it, smoothing my skirt over it, the cool leather pressed against my skin. I put the empty box back in the hole. I slid the National Geographic back into place. I stepped out of the closet just as the door handle turned. I flushed the toilet in the adjoining bathroom and stepped out, wiping my dry hands on my skirt. The door opened. It was Marin. "What are you doing up here?" she asked. Her voice was sharp. The grieving daughter mask had slipped. "There was a line for the downstairs bathroom," I said. She looked at me. She looked at the closet door. She looked at the bed. "You are snooping," she said. "I am using the restroom." "Marin, is that forbidden in the trust too?" "Get downstairs," she said, "and then get out. You are upsetting the guests." I walked past her. I could feel the ledger against my stomach. It felt like armor. I left the party 5 minutes later. I drove back to the hotel. My heart racing. I locked the door. I wedged a chair under the handle. I sat on the bed and opened the ledger again. Executor compromised. Refused to sign. My father hadn't just died. He had been circled. They had been pressuring him. Marin, North Pine, this wash from the city. And now they were trying to erase the evidence. The inventory was a purge. They were destroying the paper trail, but they didn't have the ledger. I looked at the note again. Credit union account B. I didn't know about a credit union account. I realized then that this wasn't just a family dispute. This was fraud. Maybe elder abuse. Maybe worse. I took out my phone. I took photos of every page of the ledger. I uploaded them to the secret cloud folder where I had stored the email. Then I went to the hotel business center. I scanned the pages. I emailed the file to a dummy email address I had created years ago for spam. I was done being a victim. I was done crying in police cars. I needed a lawyer, not a family friend like Russell. I needed a shark, and I needed to document everything. I opened a new notebook. I wrote down the date. I wrote down the officer's name. I wrote down the caretaker's name. I wrote down the text of the note, war. I wrote at the top of the page, if Marin wanted a war, she was going to get one. She thought she had buried me with the stolen car report, but she had made a mistake. She had left me with nothing to lose, and she had forgotten that I was my father's daughter too. I didn't get his charm, but I got his stubbornness, and I had his ledger. I turned off the light, but I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, clutching the leather book, waiting for the dawn. I did not hire a lawyer in Larkhaven. In a town where everyone played golf at the same club and attended the same fundraisers, hiring a local attorney was like asking a fox to negotiate with a wolf. I drove 40 miles north to the city, to a firm situated on the 20th floor of a glass tower that looked down on the rest of the world with cold indifference. Talia Mercer was not like Russell Klein. She did not have a messy desk or a sympathetic tilt to her head. She was a woman of sharp angles and tailored silk, with eyes that assessed my value the moment I walked through her door. I sat in a chair that cost more than my first car and laid out the facts. The false police report, the changed locks, the missing folder, and the ledger I had recovered from the guest room closet. Talia listened without interrupting. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen moving in quick, slashing strokes. When I finished, she capped her pen and looked at me. "This is not a probate dispute. Eleanor," she said. Her voice was cool, precise. "This is a heist." "A heist?" I asked. She leaned forward. "Your sister is not just being difficult. She is executing a strategy. Defamation, tortious interference with inheritance expectancy, fraud. She is building a case to disqualify you before the money is even counted. And these caretakers, this North Pine Estate Services, they are the cleanup crew." She opened the file I had brought, the limited trust summary Russell had provided. She ran a manicured finger down the page and stopped at a paragraph on the third page. "Here is the weapon," she said. I looked at the clause. Distribution of the principal is contingent upon the beneficiary's demonstrated fitness and stability, as certified by the executor. Should a beneficiary be deemed unstable, chemically dependent, or under criminal investigation, their share shall be held in a constructive trust managed by the executor until such time as stability is proven. Fitness and stability, Talia repeated. It is vague, it is subjective, and it gives the executor, your sister, the power of a judge. That is why she called the police. I said, the realization settling in my stomach like lead. That is why she said I had drugs. Exactly. Talia said, she does not need you to be convicted. She just needs the paper trail. A police report mentioning narcotics? That is grounds to trigger this clause. An arrest for resisting? Grounds. She is manufacturing a dossier of instability. If we go to court and she produces a stack of police reports and affidavits saying you are erratic, the judge might side with her just to be safe. I felt a flash of heat. My father would never have agreed to this. He trusted me. Talia looked at me skeptically. The language is here. Eleanor, Gideon Hayes signed it. The question is, did he know what he was signing? Or was he coached? She stood up and walked to the window. We need the full trust instrument, not this summary, and we need to stop playing defense. I am going to file a petition to compel production of the documents, but you need to be prepared. If Marin is willing to swat you on the highway, she's willing to do worse. Do not engage with her. Do not text her. Do not call her. If she stands in front of you and screams, you walk away. You are a statue. Do you understand? I understand, I said. I left her office feeling lighter, but also more afraid. It wasn't just family drama anymore. It was a tactical operation. My first move was to call Russell Klein. I did it from the car, recording the call on a second device. Russell, I said when he answered, I am looking at the summary you gave me. Explain the stability clause. Eleanor, he sighed. I told you I cannot discuss. This is not a request for documents. Russell, this is a question about the drafting. Why is there a clause that lets Marin decide if I am sane enough to inherit my own father's money? Who wrote that? It is standard protective language, Russell said, his voice tight. It is not standard, I snapped. It is a trap. Did Marin suggest it? No, Russell said, too quickly. No, Gideon insisted on it. Why would he do that? Because of the incident, Russell blurted out. I froze. The incident? There was a silence on the line. I could hear Russell breathing, a jagged, nervous sound. He had realized he said too much. What incident? Russell? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. I misspoke. He stammered. I meant the general concern, the situation with the economy. Gideon was very worried about the economy. You said the incident. I pressed. What incident? What did Marin tell you happened? I have to go. Russell said, I have a client. He hung up. I stared at the phone. The incident? There was no incident. I had lived a boring, responsible life. I went to work. I paid my bills. I visited my father on Sundays. Unless Marin had invented one. Unless she had planted a seed in my father's mind years ago. A story about me that I didn't even know existed. I needed to know what else Marin had access to. I drove to the secure all-storage facility on the south side of Larkhaven. My father had kept a unit there for years. Mostly for old furniture and seasonal items he didn't want cluttering the attic. I had the key on his keyring, the one I had taken from his nightstand before the caretaker locked me out. The facility was a bleak row of corrugated metal doors behind a chain-link fence. I punched in my father's gate code. Access denied. I frowned. I tried again. Access denied. My heart sped up. I walked into the office. The manager, a man with a grease-stained shirt and a suspicious squint, looked up from a crossword puzzle. "I am trying to get into Unit 42. I said, "The code isn't working." "Name?" he asked. "Gideon Hayes. I am his daughter." He typed into his computer. "Oh, yeah. Mr. Hayes passed, right? Sorry for your loss. The executor updated the access code on Tuesday. Tuesday, the day I was pulled over." "Who authorized that?" I asked. "The executor," he said. "Marin Hayes. She came in with the death certificate and the legal papers, said she had to secure the assets." I felt a cold prickle on my neck. She had been everywhere. While I was driving to the hotel, while I was sitting in the police station, she was systematically locking down every corner of my father's life. "Did she go into the unit?" I asked. "Yeah," the manager said. "She and a couple of guys said they were moving some stuff to a safer location. I need to see the unit." I said, "I have a key to the padlock." "Doesn't matter if you have a key if you can't get through the gate," he said. "And I can't let you in without the code." "Executor's orders." I slammed my hand on the counter. The manager jumped. "My name is on the lease as the secondary contact." I lied. I knew I wasn't, but I had to try. "Check the file. If you deny me access to a unit I am authorized on, I will sue this facility for illegal eviction." He hesitated. He looked at the computer, then at me. He didn't want trouble. He was paid minimum wage to watch monitors, not fight legal battles. He typed something. "Look, you ain't on the list, lady." But he glanced at the camera in the corner. If someone was to tailgate another car through the gate, I might not notice. I didn't thank him. I walked out and waited in my car. 5 minutes later, a pickup truck drove up to the keypad. As the gate slid open, I gunned my engine and slipped through behind him. I drove to Unit 42. I got out and checked the lock. It was still my father's old padlock. She hadn't changed the lock itself, just the gate code. That meant she still had a key, or she had cut it and replaced it. I inserted my key. It turned. I rolled the metal door up. It rattled like thunder in the quiet alley. The unit was mostly full. There was the old dining room set my mother had loved, boxes of Christmas lights, a lawnmower that hadn't run in 10 years. But on the metal shelving unit against the back wall, there was a gap. I walked over to it. The shelves were covered in a fine layer of gray dust. But on the middle shelf, there was a pristine, rectangular clean spot. Something had been sitting there, something about the size of a briefcase or a document box, and it had been removed recently. I looked around. Nothing else seemed disturbed. The boxes of books were still taped shut. The furniture was still covered in sheets. They hadn't come for the furniture. They had come for the box. I took a picture of the empty space on the shelf. The dust outline was perfect. A ghost of the missing evidence. What was in it? The real records Loretta had mentioned? Or something else? I left the unit and drove back toward town. My mind racing. I needed to talk to Loretta again. I needed to know what she knew about Marin's finances. I met her at the Rusty Spoon, a diner on the outskirts of town where the coffee was strong and the booths were high-backed vinyl, offering a modicum of privacy. Loretta looked tired. She was stirring her coffee, watching the swirl of cream with a hypnotic intensity. "They came to my house," she said without preamble as I slid into the booth opposite her. "Who?" I asked. "A man. Said he was a private investigator working for the estate. Asked if Gideon had given me anything for safekeeping. What did you tell him?" "I told him to go to hell," Loretta said, her eyes flashing. But Ellie, I am scared. They are serious. I know. I said, I told her about the storage unit, about the empty shelf. Loretta nodded slowly. That would have been the deed box. Gideon kept the original deeds to the properties there. He didn't trust the safe at the house. He said Marin knew the combination. Why is Marin doing this? Loretta? I asked. I know she has always been difficult. I know she is jealous. But this? This is criminal. This is orchestrated. Loretta looked around the diner, checking the nearby booths. She leaned in close. It is the debt, she whispered. What debt? Gideon told me about 6 months ago. He got a call from a collection agency. They were looking for Marin. She had co-signed some loans for a boyfriend. That awful man she was seeing in the city. The one who started that investment scheme. I remembered him. A slick talker named Julian. I thought she broke up with him. She did. Loretta said, but the debt stayed. It was huge. Eleanor. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Gideon paid off one of them to keep her out of court. But he told her it was the last time. He said if she wanted more money, she had to earn it. And then North Pine appeared? I asked. Loretta nodded. Gideon said Marin had found a consultant who could help her manage her assets. He was suspicious. He thought they were a debt settlement outfit. You know the kind. They promise to negotiate your debts down, but they take a huge fee and usually leave you in worse shape. He thought they were targeting her, and now they are targeting the estate. I said. I pulled out my phone and searched for North Pine Estate Services. The website was generic. Stock photos of happy seniors and handshakes. Compassionate transition services. I went to the Secretary of State's business search portal. I typed in the name, North Pine Estate Services, LLC, status, active, formation date, 18 months ago. I clicked on the filing history. Previous name, Apex Asset Recovery. Previous name, Ironclad Debt Solutions. I showed the screen to Loretta. They aren't caretakers. I said, they are debt collectors, or liquidators. Loretta put her hand over her mouth. Oh my God, she made a deal with them. She owes them money. I realized, and she promised them a cut of the inheritance if they helped her get it. That is why they are so aggressive. They aren't working for the estate. They are working for their own payout, if they get control of the trust, Loretta said, her voice trembling. They will drain it dry. There won't be anything left for anyone. We have to stop them, I said. But before I could formulate a plan, my phone buzzed. It was an email notification. Service of process. I frowned and opened it. It was from a process server service. You have been served with an emergency protective order. I clicked the attachment. Petitioner. Marin Hayes. Respondent. Eleanor Hayes. Allegations. Harassment. Stalking. Verbal abuse. I scrolled down to the statement of facts. On Tuesday, February 2nd, the respondent threatened the petitioner via telephone. The respondent has a history of mental instability and has been seen loitering around the petitioner's residence and storage facilities. The petitioner fears for her safety, and there was an attachment, a transcript of a voicemail. Voice of respondent. I am going to get, Marin, you are going to pay, I will burn it down. I stared at the words. I had never said that. I played the audio file attached to the email. It was my voice, but it was choppy, digital. I am going to get, static, Marin, static, you are going to pay, static, I will burn it down. I recognized the phrases. I am going to get a lawyer. You are going to pay for what you did. I will burn it down. Was from a conversation years ago about a shed in the backyard that was full of termites. She had edited my voicemails. She had spliced together snippets of my voice to create a death threat. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was the fitness and stability proof. A protective order based on a threat of violence. If this order was granted, I would be legally branded as dangerous. The trust clause would activate. I would be disinherited. I called Talia. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. Talia, I said. She filed for a protective order. She faked a voicemail. Send it to me. Talia said instantly. Do not reply to it. Do not post about it. Where are you? I am at a diner with a friend. Go back to your hotel. Talia ordered. Stay in public view until you get there. If the police come to serve you the physical papers, you accept them politely. You say thank you, officer, and nothing else. But it is a lie. I cried. It is a fake tape. We will prove that in court, Talia said. We will hire a forensic audio expert. But right now, Eleanor, you are walking a tightrope. If you go to her house and scream at her, you make the lie true. If you call her and threaten her for lying, you make the lie true. I feel like I'm going crazy, I whispered. That is the goal, Talia said. That is the strategy. Gaslighting is not just emotional abuse, it is a legal tactic. They want you to break. They want you to have a public meltdown so they can point at you and say, See, we told you she was unstable. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. I will not break. I said, Good, Talia said. Go to the hotel. I will draft a motion to quash. We are going to fight this. But Eleanor? Yes? Prepare yourself. This is going to get uglier. If they are forging evidence, they are desperate. And desperate people are dangerous. I hung up. I looked at Loretta. I have to go, I said. Loretta reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her skin was paper thin, but her grip was strong. Your father was a fighter. Eleanor, she said. He didn't say much, but he never backed down from a bully. You have his chin. Use it. I walked out of the diner. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the parking lot. I felt exposed. I felt like every car passing by might be North Pine. Every person on their phone might be recording me. I drove to the hotel. I ordered room service because I was too afraid to go to a restaurant. When the food came, a club sandwich and fries, I couldn't eat it. My stomach was a knot of acid and fear. I sat by the window, looking out at the parking lot. I watched my car. I half expected to see a tow truck pull up, or a police cruiser. I thought about the edited voicemail, the level of malice required to sit at a computer and splice your sister's voice into a threat. It was cold. It was reptilian. I realized then that I didn't have a sister anymore. I had an adversary. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the photos of the ledger. I pulled up the North Pine business filings. I started a timeline. January 15th. Marin contacts North Pine. February 1st. Gideon dies. February 3rd. Will reading. February 3rd. Police stop. February 4th. Locks changed. Storage accessed. February 5th. Protective order filed. It was a blitzkrieg. They were trying to knock me out in the first round. But I was still standing. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the air conditioner. I felt a deep, hollow ache in my chest. It was grief, finally trying to find a way in. But I pushed it back. I couldn't afford to be human right now. I couldn't afford to cry for my father, or for the sister I had lost. I had to be a machine. I had to be strategic. I turned over and looked at the clock. 3 a.m. I closed my eyes and visualized the courtroom. I visualized Marin's face when I played the unedited voicemails. I visualized the judge reading the ledger. I would win. I had to. Not for the money, but because if I didn't, the lie would become the truth. And that was something I could not live with. The next morning, I would go to the probate court. I would request the full file. I would find the backup executor mentioned in the outline I had memorized. Loretta Vance. The war was just beginning, and I was done retreating. The clerk at the county probate court was a woman named Phyllis, who looked like she had been stamping documents since the Reagan administration. She peered at me over reading glasses that hung from a beaded chain. Her expression one of mild bureaucratic annoyance. I need the full file for the estate of Gideon Hayes. I said, sliding my driver's license across the counter, case number 49221. Phyllis sighed, a sound like a tire slowly losing air. She typed my name into her terminal with agonizing slowness. You are a beneficiary? She asked. Yes, I said, and the daughter. She disappeared into the back rows of filing cabinets. The room smelled of dust and floor wax, the scent of stagnant legal battles. I stood there, gripping the edge of the counter, my knuckles white. Talia Mercer, my attorney, had filed the motion to compel yesterday. We weren't asking for the summary anymore. We were demanding the source code of my father's legacy. Phyllis returned with a thick stack of papers. She dropped it on the counter with a heavy thud. "Copies are 50 cents a page," she said. I paid $40 in cash. I took the stack to a wooden bench in the hallway, sat down, and began to read. Most of it was standard boilerplate. Legal definitions, tax identifiers, property descriptions, but on page 14 of the trust instrument, buried in a section titled Successor Trustees, I found it. In the event that the primary executor, Maren Hayes, is unable, unwilling, or found to be acting in violation of her fiduciary duties, including but not limited to self-dealing, fraud, or unethical conduct, the role of executor shall immediately pass to the secondary appointee, Loretta Vance. I read the sentence 3 times. Loretta. My father hadn't just left a cryptic note about a ledger. He had built a fail-safe into the document itself. He knew, deep down, he knew Maren might break. He had named Loretta, the one person Maren couldn't manipulate, as the emergency brake. I felt a surge of hope, sharp and bright. We didn't just have to prove Maren was incompetent. We just had to prove she was acting unethically. And with the false police report, the changed locks, and the edited voicemails, we had a library of evidence. I called Loretta immediately. "Loretta," I said, my voice echoing in the marble hallway, "you are the backup. It is in the trust. If we can prove Maren is compromising the estate, you take over. You can fire North Pine. You can open the books." There was a silence on the other end. "Loretta?" I asked. "Eleanor," she said, her voice sounding thin and strained. "I was just about to call you. What is wrong?" "A man was just here," she said. "A process server." My stomach dropped. "What did he give you?" "It is a legal notice," Loretta said, "from a lawyer named Bennett Rowe. It says—" She paused, and I could hear the rustle of paper. "It says I am being challenged as unsuitable due to undue influence and geriatric mental decline." I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead against the cool stone of the courthouse wall. "They anticipated it," I whispered. "They want me to sign a waiver," Loretta said, sounding on the verge of tears, renouncing any claim to the role. "They said if I don't sign, they will depose my doctor. They will drag me through court to prove I am senile. Eleanor, I am 70 years old. I can't afford a lawyer to fight this. You won't have to," I said, a cold fury rising in my chest. "Do not sign anything. Send the papers to Talia. Bennett Rowe is trying to scare you because he knows you are the threat." "Who is Bennett Rowe?" Loretta asked. "I don't know," I said, "but I'm going to find out." I drove straight to Talia's office in the city. When I showed her the clause and the notice Loretta had received, Talia's expression didn't change, but her eyes narrowed. "Bennett Rowe," she said, leaning back in her leather chair. "Of course. You know him?" I asked. "I know his reputation," Talia said. "He calls himself an estate litigator. Everyone else calls him the gravedigger. He specializes in high-conflict estates, where the goal is to burn everything down so he can bill the ashes. If Maren hired him, she is done pretending to be the sweet, grieving sister. She has brought in a mercenary. Can we stop him from harassing Loretta?" I asked. "We can file a motion to stay," Talia said. "But Bennett moves fast. He is trying to knock Loretta off the board before the judge even realizes she is a player." She tapped the file on her desk. "But we have something Bennett doesn't know about yet. The North Pine contract." She spun her monitor around so I could see. "I subpoenaed the digital metadata for the contract Maren signed with North Pine Estate Services," Talia said. "Maren claims she signed it on February 1st, the morning your father died, right at the hospital. She claims your father verbally approved it before he passed." "Right," I said. "Look at the timestamp," Talia said, pointing to a line of code highlighted in yellow. "February 1st, 9:42 M." "Okay," I said, That was when she was at the hospital. I remember because I was driving in from Larkhaven. Now look at the IP address, Talia said. She pointed to the next line. I looked at the string of numbers. It meant nothing to me. I ran a trace. Talia said, this IP address does not belong to a mobile network. It doesn't belong to the hospital Wi-Fi. It is a static IP registered to a commercial office building in downtown. Specifically, the building where North Pines Shell Company, Apex Asset Recovery, has an office. I stared at the screen. So she wasn't at the hospital? I asked. We know she was at the hospital, Talia said. You saw her there. The nurses saw her there. Then how did she sign a digital contract from an office 10 miles away at the exact same time? She didn't, I realized. Someone else signed it for her. Exactly, Talia said. Or she gave someone her credentials to sign it. Either way, it is fraud. You cannot execute a fiduciary contract via proxy without a power of attorney, which she didn't have yet. And if she was at the hospital while her digital ghost was signing contracts in an office tower, the contract is invalid. And if the contract is invalid, North Pine has no right to be in that house. We need proof she was at the hospital at that exact minute. I said, to prove she couldn't have been at the computer. I'm already on it, Talia said. I sent a preservation letter to the hospital security office. We need the lobby footage. 2 days later, the footage arrived. We watched it in Talia's conference room. The video was grainy, black and white, with a running time code in the corner. 9:40 a.m. Marin walked into the frame. She was pacing the lobby of the critical care unit. She looked agitated. She was holding a phone to her ear. But she wasn't talking. She was listening. 9:41 a.m. A man entered the lobby. He was tall, wearing a gray suit that looked expensive even in the low-resolution video. He did not check in at the desk. He walked straight to Marin. They didn't hug. They didn't shake hands. Marin reached into her large tote bag. She pulled out a folder. It was thin, maybe 10 pages. She handed it to the man. He opened it, glanced at the contents, and nodded. 9:42 a.m. The man took out his phone. He typed something. He showed the screen to Marin. She nodded frantically. Then the man turned and walked out. Marin put her phone back in her bag and went to the elevator. I froze the video. That is the moment, I said. 9:42. The exact minute the contract was signed. She didn't sign it, Talia said, her voice quiet. He did, or he messaged his office to push the button the second she handed over the folder. What was in the folder? I asked. Talia zoomed in. It was impossible to read the text, but the folder had a distinctive blue color, blue legal backing. Talia said, usually used for original estate documents, wills, deeds. She gave him the originals, I said, realizing the horror of it. That is why the house was empty. That is why the study was rearranged. She didn't just hire them to guard the house. She handed them the keys to the kingdom. This is it, Talia said, typing furiously on her laptop. We have her. Constructive fraud. Collusion. I am going to attach these stills to the affidavit, but the war had 2 fronts, and while we were advancing on one, Marin was flanking us on the other. That afternoon, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Hayes? A whispered voice asked. Yes? Don't use my name, the voice said. It was female, young. I am calling from Russell Klein's office. I am a clerk. My heart skipped a beat. Why are you calling me? Because I saw what they did to your sister. I mean, to you. I saw the police report Russell has in the file. It is wrong. And, look, I can't stay on. But you need to know. Files are going missing here. What files? I asked, pressing the phone to my ear. The Hayes file, she said. The physical file is empty. Russell says he took it home, but he didn't. He never takes files home. And yesterday, I heard him on the phone with the scanning vendor. He was yelling. Who is the scanning vendor? I asked. Iron Mountain Digital, she said. They do our off-site archives. Russell was asking if a purge had gone through. A purge? He wanted to know if the digital scans of your father's old wills had been deleted. She said, He sounded panicked. Why would he delete the old wills? Because, the clerk whispered, if the current will is challenged, the court looks at the previous one. If the previous one is gone, then the current one stands by default. Thank you, I said. You have no idea how much this helps. Please don't tell anyone I called. She said, Bennett Rowe has been here. He scares me. She hung up. I didn't call Talia this time. I needed to move fast. I drove to the Iron Mountain Digital Facility. It was located in an industrial park near the airport, a windowless concrete bunker surrounded by barbed wire. I walked into the front office. It was sterile, smelling of ozone and server coolant. I am Eleanor Hayes. I told the shift manager. I am the co-beneficiary of the Gideon Hayes estate. Our attorney, Russell Klein, sent over a request, but there seems to be a confusion about the status of a deletion. The manager, a guy named Dave with a lanyard of security keys, frowned. We don't usually discuss tickets with clients directly. He said, I understand. I said, projecting a calm I did not feel. But Russell is in court and he is frantic. He needs to confirm the rush deletion on the Hayes packet was stopped. He is worried it might have gone through by accident. I was gambling. That stopped was the answer he wanted to hear. Dave typed into his console, Hayes. Oh. Yeah. Request number 804. Submitted Tuesday. Permanent scrub of legacy documents. He looked up. Yeah, it was flagged. We rejected it. You rejected it? I asked. My knees weak with relief. Policy, Dave said. We can't delete legal records on a rush request without a court order or a notarized destruction affidavit. Mr. Klein didn't provide either. He just sent an email saying, delete immediately. We told him no. The files are still on the server. Can I get a copy of that rejection log? I asked, just to reassure him that the files are safe. Dave shrugged. I guess so. It is just a status report. He printed a single sheet of paper. Ticket number 804. Request for deletion. Status: denied. Reason: insufficient authorization. I took the paper. It was proof. Russell Klein, acting on Marin's orders, or Bennett Rowe's orders, had tried to burn the history of my father's intentions, and he had failed. I walked out to my car, feeling a surge of adrenaline. We had the hospital video. We had the IP address. We had the deletion attempt. We were building a fortress of evidence, but I had forgotten the cardinal rule of war. When your enemy is cornered, they do not surrender. They lash out. The blow came 2 hours later. I was sitting in my hotel room, organizing the new evidence, when my cell phone rang. It was the HR director at the Larkhaven Medical Center. Eleanor? She asked. Her voice was stiff, formal. Hi, Sarah, I said. I'm planning to be back on Monday. The funeral was... Eleanor, she cut me off. We need to talk about your employment status. I froze. My employment? We received a call today. Sarah said, from the Larkhaven Police Department, and from a private attorney representing the estate. What did they say? I asked, though I could already feel the floor tilting. They informed us that you are under active investigation for grand theft auto and narcotics possession. Sarah said, and that there is a protective order pending against you for threats of violence. Sarah, that is a lie, I said, gripping the phone. My sister filed a false report. I was released. There are no charges. Eleanor, we have a zero-tolerance policy for criminal investigations involving drugs, she said, especially for someone with access to patient files and prescription pads. I don't use drugs, I cried. Sarah, you know me. I have worked there for 6 years. I know, Sarah said, and her voice softened slightly. But the policy is clear. Until this is resolved, we have to place you on administrative leave. Without pay. Without pay? I whispered. Sarah, I have bills. I have legal fees. I am sorry, she said. Once you are cleared, we can discuss back pay. But for now, you are suspended. Please do not come to the office. We will mail you your personal effects. She hung up. I sat there, the phone slipping from my hand onto the bedspread. Administrative leave, no paycheck. Marin knew. She knew I lived on my salary, She knew I was paying Talia almost $400 an hour. If she cut off my income, I couldn't afford the lawyer. If I couldn't afford the lawyer, I couldn't fight the trust. It was surgical. It was brutal. And for the first time since the roadside stop, I felt the cracks forming. I walked into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. My eyes were dark hollows. My skin was pale. I looked unstable. Maybe she is right, a voice whispered in my head. Maybe you are losing it. You are fighting a multi-million-dollar machine with a notebook and a thumb drive. You are hiding in a cheap hotel. You are unemployed. The doubt was a cold worm, burrowing into my brain. Marin's narrative wasn't just a lie anymore. She was forcing my reality to match it. She was making me into the desperate, broke, erratic woman she claimed I was. I sank to the floor of the bathroom, pulling my knees to my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to her house and break the windows. No, that is what she wants. Ground yourself. I took a breath, then another. I needed help. Not legal help, mental help. I couldn't afford to crumble. I pulled out my phone and searched for a therapist in the city. Someone who did emergency sessions. Someone who didn't know Marin. I found a woman named Dr. Aris. I booked a session for that evening, paying the $150 with my credit card. The office was quiet. Dr. Aris was a small woman with kind eyes and no agenda. I am not crazy, I told her, sitting on the beige couch, but they are trying to make me crazy. Tell me, she said. I told her everything. The gaslighting, the edited tape, the job loss, the constant looking over my shoulder. She listened. Then she said, Eleanor, you are experiencing a trauma response. You are in a high-stakes survival situation. Your anxiety is not a symptom of instability. It is a symptom of awareness. You are reacting correctly to a threat. I feel like I am drowning. I said, then we build a raft, she said. We focus on what you can control. You cannot control Marin. You cannot control the police. You can control your breath. You can control your next step. She gave me exercises, grounding techniques, 5 things you see, 4 things you touch. I left her office feeling not fixed, but braced. I wasn't unstable. I was under siege. There was a difference. I went back to Talia's office the next morning. I told her about the job. They are trying to bleed you out, Talia said, her face grim. I know. I said, but I'm not quitting. I have some savings. I have credit cards. I will sell my car if I have to. You won't have to, Talia said, because we are going to pivot. We have been playing defense, trying to stop the protective order, trying to get the documents. She opened a new file on her computer. It is time to go on the offensive, she said. What do we do? First, Talia said, we file for sanctions against Bennett Rowe and Russell Klein. The deletion request at Iron Mountain? That is destruction of evidence. That is a disparable offense. We attach the rejection log. We ask the judge to report them to the Bar Association. And Marin? I asked. Talia smiled. A sharp, dangerous smile. We file a civil suit, malicious prosecution, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We tie it to the stolen car report. We use the police body cam footage. We use the hospital video. We sue her personally. She leaned forward. She is attacking your inheritance? We attack her assets. We freeze her accounts. We make her too busy defending herself to come after you. Can we do that? I asked. We have the evidence, Talia said. You gave me the ammo. Now let me fire the gun. She drafted the complaint while I sat there. I watched the words appear on the screen. Plaintiff Eleanor Hayes. Defendant Marin Hayes. Acting with malice and forethought. It looked like justice. But as I left the office, walking out into the bright, indifferent city sunlight, I couldn't shake the feeling of the hospital video. The man in the gray suit. He had taken the blue folder. He had the original will. He had the original trust. If he destroyed them, if the only copies left were the digital ones Russell tried to delete, then all the lawsuits in the world wouldn't matter, because the truth would be gone. I needed to know who the man in the gray suit was. I pulled out the stillness photo Talia had printed for me. I looked at his face. It was blurry, but distinctive. Sharp jaw, receding hairline. I had seen him before, not in person, but somewhere. I sat on a bench and closed my eyes, scrolling through my memory. Marin's ex-boyfriends. My father's old business partners. No. Then I remembered the consultant Loretta mentioned, the one who helped Marin with her debts. I opened the North Pine business filing again on my phone. North Pine Estate Services. Registered agent. Corporated Irv Incorporated. Dead end. But then I looked at the manager listed on the filing. B. Rowe. Bennett Rowe. The lawyer wasn't just hired by Marin. He was the manager of North Pine. I looked at the photo again. The man in the gray suit. I searched Bennett Rowe attorney on Google. His profile picture popped up on a sleek law firm website. Bennett Rowe. Estate litigation asset protection. It was him. The man in the hospital lobby was Bennett Rowe. He hadn't just taken the case last week. He had been there the morning my father died. He had taken the documents from Marin minutes after my father took his last breath. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was the architect. I stared at the phone. The web was tighter than I thought. Marin wasn't the general. She was the soldier. Bennett Rowe was the general. And he had the originals. I stood up. My legs felt steady. My breath was calm. 5 things I see: the bus, the pigeon, the building, the lawyer who was going to pay. I dialed Talia. Don't file the sanctions yet. I said, why? She asked. Because I know who the man in the video is. I said, it is Bennett Rowe. He took the originals. Talia, he is a witness, a co-conspirator, and the attorney all in one. There was a silence on the line. Then Talia let out a low whistle. If he is a material witness to the theft of the documents, Talia said, her voice buzzing with excitement, he is disqualified from representing her. We can kick him off the case. And if he is the manager of North Pine, I added, then he is self-dealing. He hired his own company to loot the house. Eleanor, Talia said, you just nuked his entire defense. Get the motion ready. I said, we are going to court. I hung up. I looked at the city skyline. I was unemployed. I was broke. I was accused of being a drug addict. But for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Because I knew something they didn't. I knew the face of the enemy, and I was coming for him. The deposition took place in a windowless conference room at a court reporting service downtown, neutral ground that felt more like a sterile bunker. Marin sat across the long polished table, flanked by Bennett Rowe. She wore a cardigan in a soft, muted beige, a garment chosen specifically to convey harmlessness. Her hands were folded on the table, clutching a pack of tissues like a shield. My attorney, Talia Mercer, sat beside me, her posture erect, her eyes sharp. She adjusted the microphone clipped to her lapel and nodded to the court reporter. We are on the record, Talia stated. Marin looked at me only once. Her eyes were wide, filled with a sorrow that looked so genuine it made my stomach turn. She was playing the role of the martyr. The sister forced into a corner by a family tragedy. Talia began gently. She asked about the timeline of our father's death, the funeral arrangements, the general state of the family. Marin answered softly, her voice trembling at appropriate intervals. Then Talia shifted. Ms. Hayes, let us discuss the afternoon of February 3rd. Talia said, you called the police to report your sister's vehicle stolen. Is that correct? Yes. Marin whispered, I did. And why did you do that? I was terrified, Marin said, looking at the camera. Eleanor had stormed out of the will reading. She was irrational. She had been talking about conspiracies. When I got back to the house and saw the car was gone, I panicked. I thought she might hurt herself. I thought she had taken the car to flee the state. I just wanted the police to find her and make sure she was safe. Talia nodded slowly. You wanted to make sure she was safe. So you reported the car as stolen? It was the only way to get them to look for her quickly. Marin said, I was desperate. Talia looked down at her notes. You stated to the dispatch officer that you had arrived at the house at 1 in the afternoon and found the car missing. Is that correct? Yes, Marin said. And you called the police immediately? Yes, within minutes. Talia picked up a document, a single sheet of paper. Ms. Hayes, I have here the cell tower records for your mobile phone on that day. Can you explain why, at 1 in the afternoon, your phone was pinging a tower in the downtown financial district, 12 miles from the family home? Marin froze. Her hand tightened on the tissues. I might be mistaken about the exact time. She stammered. It was a chaotic day. Talia did not look up. The records show you did not arrive in the vicinity of the family home until 1:45. Yet the police report indicates you told the officer you had been searching the house for an hour before calling. Which is it, Ms. Hayes? Were you at the house searching for your sister? Or were you downtown meeting with your attorney? Bennett Rowe leaned forward. Objection. Badgering. I am asking for a clarification of the timeline, Talia said calmly. I was confused, Marin snapped, the soft voice hardening for a split second. I lost track of time. My father had just died. Talia let the silence hang in the air. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. So, Talia continued, you lied to the police about your location and the duration of the car's disappearance? I did not lie, Marin said, tears springing to her eyes again. I was protecting her. Protecting her by asking the police to check for narcotics? Talia asked. I never said that, Marin said quickly. Talia pulled another document from the stack, the police log. The dispatch log records a second call at 2:40 in the afternoon. Talia read, Caller advises officers to check subject vehicle for controlled substances. Are you denying you made that call? Marin looked at Bennett Rowe. He gave a barely perceptible shake of his head. I don't recall that specific conversation. Marin said, I was in a state of shock. Talia closed the folder. You don't recall trying to frame your sister for drug possession, but you recall exactly how irrational she looked at the will reading? Objection, Rowe barked. We are done with this line of questioning. Talia said. We walked out of the deposition feeling a grim sense of progress. Marin had cracked. She had contradicted herself on the record. But perjury in a civil deposition was hard to prosecute. We needed more. 2 days later, the police department finally complied with our subpoena for the body cam footage. I sat in Talia's office, my hands gripping the arms of the chair. As she loaded the file on the large wall-mounted monitor, I do not want to watch this. I said, You need to see what the jury will see, Talia said. You need to see that you did nothing wrong. She pressed play. The video was jerky, filmed from the chest of the officer who had pulled me over. I saw my own car, the blue sedan, stopped on the shoulder. I heard the siren cut off. I saw the officer's arms extend, the gun leveled. I saw myself. I looked small. I was wearing my black slacks and a white blouse. I was kneeling on the asphalt, my hands on my head. I was crying, but I was not screaming. I was not fighting. Please don't shoot me. The voice on the recording sobbed. Please don't shoot me. Talia fast-forwarded. The scene shifted to the back of the cruiser. I was sitting there, handcuffed, staring out the window. I looked terrified, but completely lucid. Then came the audio from the front seat. The officer was driving, talking to his partner. Dispatch says the sister is calling again. The partner's voice said, She is asking if we found the stash. What stash? The driver asked. Car is clean. I don't know. The partner replied. Lady sounds like she wants her arrested today. Like, really wants it. Kept asking if we could hold her for 72 hours on a psych eval. Sounds like a civil beef. The driver grunted. This girl is quiet. She ain't high. Talia paused the video. There it is, she said. What? I asked, wiping my eyes. The intent. Talia said, She sounds like she wants her arrested today. That is a police officer, a neutral party, observing your sister's malice in real time. That destroys her argument that she was just a concerned sibling. A concerned sibling wants you safe. A malicious actor wants you held for 72 hours. She saved the clip. This goes to the judge. This goes to the malicious prosecution suit. Marin just handed us the knife she tried to stab you with. But Marin was only one head of the Hydra. Bennett Rowe was the other. I had been spending my nights digging into Bennett Rowe's past. I had a subscription to a legal database now, paid for with the last of my credit card limit. I searched for his name in connection with North Pine, with Apex Asset Recovery, with every shell company I could find. I found a pattern. 5 years ago, a class action lawsuit was filed against a company called Apex Recovery Solutions for predatory lending practices and illegal garnishment. The attorney representing Apex was Bennett Rowe. 3 years ago, a debt settlement firm called Ironclad Solutions was sued by the state attorney general for deceptive marketing. They were targeting elderly people, promising to settle their debts for pennies on the dollar, but instead taking huge upfront fees and letting the debts default. The attorney of record for Ironclad was Bennett Rowe. North Pine Estate Services shared an address with Apex. It shared a registered agent with Ironclad. I brought the printouts to Talia. "He is not just her lawyer," I said, spreading the papers on her desk. "He is the ringleader. He runs these companies. He finds people in debt, like Marin, and he offers them a way out. But the way out is to let his companies devour the assets." Talia read the case files. Her face grew hard. He represented the company that was chasing Marin for her debts. Talia realized, and then he switched sides to represent her? That is a non-waivable conflict of interest unless what? Unless the goal was never to help Marin. Talia said, "It was to help North Pine. He is using Marin as a key to unlock your father's estate. She is the executor, but he is the one pulling the strings. He gets his fees as the attorney. His company gets the asset management fees, and his other company probably buys the house for below market value. It is an ecosystem," I said, "a machine designed to strip the carcass clean, and you are the only thing standing in the way." Talia said, "That is why they came at you so hard. They didn't expect a fight. They expected you to fold. We need to tell the judge." I said, "We will." Talia promised, "But we need to make sure Loretta is safe first. If they take her out, we lose our backup." I drove to Loretta's house that evening. The small bungalow was dark, the curtains drawn tight. I knocked on the back door, the secret knock we had used since I was a child. Loretta opened the door. She looked 10 years older than she had at the funeral. She was holding a letter in her shaking hand. "They sent another one," she whispered, letting me in. I looked at the letter. It was on Bennett Rowe's letterhead. Notice of intent to sue for defamation. It claimed that Loretta had been spreading malicious lies about the estate administration and threatened to sue her for damages totaling $500,000 if she did not sign a retraction and a resignation as successor executor. "He is trying to bankrupt me," Loretta said, sitting at her kitchen table. "Eleanor, I can't lose this house. It is all I have." "You won't lose it," I said, sitting beside her. "This is a scare tactic. He can't sue you for telling the truth." "But I don't have the money to prove it is the truth," she cried. "You don't have to prove it alone." I said, I pulled the affidavit Talia had drafted out of my bag. "Loretta," I said, "this is a sworn statement. It details everything Gideon told you, the fear of Marin, the distrust of Russell Klein, the existence of the ledger. If you sign this, it becomes evidence. It becomes a shield. If he sues you after you sign this, it is witness intimidation. It is a felony." Loretta looked at the document. She read the paragraphs describing my father's last months, his suspicion that his daughter was being manipulated by sharks. She looked up at me. "Gideon was so afraid," she whispered. "He told me he felt like he was living in a house with a stranger. Sign it. Loretta. For him." She picked up a pen. Her hand trembled, but she pressed the tip to the paper. She signed her name, Loretta Vance. Then she stood up and walked to a ceramic cookie jar on the counter. She reached inside and pulled out a stack of folded papers. "He gave me these too," she said. "I was too scared to show you before." I unfolded them. They were printouts of emails, from Gideon to himself. Subject, the ledger. Date, January 12th. "I have moved the reserves to the new account. Marin does not know. Russell does not know. If I die, The ledger matches the credit union records, dual records, one for the Vultures, one for Eleanor. My breath caught in my throat. One for Eleanor. He hadn't left me out. He hadn't forgotten me. He had hidden my inheritance to protect it. I hugged Loretta. "We are going to win," I whispered. The next morning, I took the ledger and the emails to the bank. It was a small credit union on the other side of the county, a place my father had never banked with before. That was the point. I sat in the branch manager's office. I showed him the death certificate. I showed him the emails. I showed him the ledger pages on my phone. I believe my father, Gideon Hayes, opened an account here in January. I said, "The manager, a man named Mr. Henderson," typed into his computer. He frowned. "I cannot disclose account details to anyone but the executor," he said, "and the system lists Marin Hayes as the executor." "I know," I said, "and she is currently under investigation for fraud. I am not asking for the money. Mr. Henderson, I am asking for confirmation." I pushed the ledger photo across the desk. "This ledger lists a deposit of $50,000 on March 10th. I said, "Does that match your records?" He looked at the photo. He looked at his screen. He didn't speak. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice steady, "if that money is gone, if it has been withdrawn by Marin Hayes or North Pine Estate Services, then this institution is part of a criminal investigation. I need to know if the assets are secure." He looked at me over his glasses. "The account is active," he said carefully. "It has not been accessed since the date of death." "Thank you." I exhaled. "And," he added, lowering his voice, "the beneficiary designation on this account is not the estate." "It isn't?" "No. It is a payable on death account. It bypasses probate entirely." "Who is the beneficiary?" I asked, though I already felt the answer in my chest. "I can't tell you that without a court order," he said, "but I can tell you that if you are Eleanor Hayes, you should bring your identification when you come back with that order." He smiled, a small, conspiratorial smile. The money was there. It wasn't in the trust. It wasn't subject to the stability clause. It was mine, direct, untouchable by Marin. But I couldn't access it until the court confirmed I wasn't disqualified by the criminal investigation Marin had fabricated. The stability clause in the main trust might not apply to this account legally, but the bank would freeze everything if there was a dispute about my identity or legal standing. I walked out of the credit union into the bright afternoon sun. I felt a sense of vindication so strong it made me dizzy. My father had outsmarted them. He had anticipated the trap and built a back door. But Marin, or Bennett Rowe, must have realized the trap was failing, because 2 days later, the settlement offer arrived. It came via courier to Talia's office, a thick envelope on heavy bond paper. I sat in Talia's conference room and read it. Settlement agreement and release. The estate of Gideon Hayes agrees to pay Eleanor Hayes the sum of $75,000. In exchange, Eleanor Hayes agrees to 1. Withdraw all pending motions and lawsuits. 2. Resign any claim to the role of executor or trustee. 3. Sign a statement acknowledging that the police report of February 3rd was a result of a misunderstanding and that no malice was intended by any party. 4. Abide by a non-disparagement clause regarding Marin Hayes and North Pine Estate Services. $75,000. It was enough to live on for a year. It was enough to pay Talia. It was enough to walk away and never see Marin's face again. For a moment, just a moment, I was tempted. I was so tired. I was tired of the hotel. I was tired of the fear. I was tired of being a warrior. I looked at the number. 75,000. "It is a low ball," Talia said. "The estate is worth nearly $1 million, even with the debts. They are trying to buy you off cheap. It isn't the money." I said. I pointed to paragraph 3, acknowledging that the police report was a misunderstanding. "If I sign this," I said, "I am admitting that I wasn't the victim. I am admitting that her version of reality is the truth. I am signing my name to a lie that says she was a concerned sister and I was a problem to be managed." Talia nodded. "And once you sign that, the stability narrative becomes permanent. You will always be the sister who had the episode. I thought about the officer's voice on the tape. She sounds like she wants her arrested today. I thought about the lock on the study door. I thought about my father's note. Executor compromised. If I took the money, I was selling my father out. I was letting Bennett Row and North Pine win. I was letting them strip the house, erase the history, and walk away counting their cash. I pushed the paper away. No, I said. Are you sure? Talia asked. It is a guaranteed check. If we go to trial, we could lose. The judge could decide the trust language is binding. You could walk away with nothing. I won't walk away with nothing. I said, I have the truth, and I have the ledger. I picked up the pen, but not to sign. I drew a thick, black line through the entire first page of the settlement. Tell them I decline, I said. Tell them I will see them in court. Talia grinned. She looked like a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. I was hoping you would say that, she said. The rejection of the settlement was the final declaration of war. Bennett Row responded by filing a motion to expedite the hearing. Claiming that my frivolous litigation was draining the estate assets, the judge, the Honorable Marcus Sterling, set a date for the final evidentiary hearing. It was 1 week away. At the pre-hearing conference, Judge Sterling looked at both attorneys over the rim of his spectacles. He was a man known for his patience, but his patience was clearly wearing thin. This case has become a circus, Judge Sterling said, his voice echoing in the cavernous courtroom. We have allegations of fraud, perjury, document destruction, and police manipulation. I have reviewed the filings. He looked directly at Bennett Row. Mr. Row, the court takes the allegation of spoliation of evidence very seriously. If I find that documents have been destroyed or altered, I will not only sanction the estate, I will refer the matter to the district attorney. Row did not flinch. He stood tall, the picture of slick confidence. Your Honor, these are desperate accusations from a disinherited beneficiary. We welcome the opportunity to present the facts. And Ms. Mercer, the judge turned to Talia, you are making heavy claims against a fellow officer of the court. You had better have the receipts. We do. Your Honor, Talia said. The judge banged his gavel. Hearing is set for Friday. 1 week. Bring your evidence, counselors, and bring your clients. I want everyone in this room under oath. I walked out of the courtroom feeling the weight of the coming week. It was all or nothing. If we won, Marin would be removed, North Pine would be exposed, and I would get my life back. If we lost, I would be the crazy sister who sued her family and lost everything. As I walked to the parking garage, I saw Marin standing by the elevator. She was alone for once. She looked at me. The mask of the grieving sister was gone. In its place was something colder, something brittle. You should have taken the money. Eleanor, she said. Her voice was flat. I don't want your money. Marin, I said, I want my father's house back. It isn't his house anymore, she said. It belongs to the trust, and the trust belongs to me. She stepped into the elevator. You are going to lose, Elle, she said as the doors closed. You always were too emotional. I stood there, watching the numbers climb. I wasn't emotional, not anymore. I was focused, I was grounded, and I was ready. I drove back to the hotel, the city skyline passing in a blur. I had 1 week to prepare for the most important day of my life. I had the ledger, I had the body cam, I had the hospital video, but I had a nagging feeling that Bennett Row had one last card to play. A man who forged signatures and deleted archives didn't go into a final hearing without an ace up his sleeve. I just had to figure out what it was before Friday. I spent the next 3 days in a war room mode. Talia and I prepared binders of exhibits. We practiced my testimony. We subpoenaed the bank manager. We subpoenaed the Iron Mountain technician. But the silence from Marin's side was unnerving. No more motions. No more emails. Just a quiet, waiting void. Then, the night before the hearing, my phone buzzed. It was an anonymous email. No subject line. I opened it. It was a single PDF attachment. I clicked it open. Trust amendment. Final. I read the first page. My heart stopped. It was a document I had never seen before. It was dated 2 days before my father died. It was signed by Gideon Hayes, and it explicitly revoked all prior wills, trusts, and codicils. It named Bennett Rowe as the sole trustee. It named Marin as the sole beneficiary, and it specifically disinherited Eleanor Hayes. Citing irreconcilable estrangement, I stared at the signature. It looked like my father's. It looked shaky, weak, but it was his loop, his slant. If this was real, everything we had done, the ledger, the bank account, the backup executor, was meaningless. A later amendment trumped everything. I forwarded it to Talia with shaking fingers. "Is this real?" I typed. Her reply came back in 30 seconds. It wasn't in the discovery file. They held it back. "This is the ambush." I looked at the metadata of the file. Created, February 12th, 12 days after my father died. It was a forgery, a digital forgery created after the fact to retroactively kill my case. But could we prove it? I looked at the clock. The hearing was in 12 hours. I didn't sleep. I paced the hotel room, the PDF glowing on my laptop screen like a radioactive isotope. They were betting everything on this fake document. They were betting that a judge would see a signed amendment and throw out my case. But they had made a mistake. I zoomed in on the notary stamp at the bottom of the page. State of New York. Commission expires. June 2025. The notary's name was Sarah Jenkins. I searched for Sarah Jenkins. She was a mobile notary based in Larkhaven, but there was something wrong. My father died on February 1st. The amendment was dated January 30th. On January 30th, there was a blizzard in Larkhaven. The roads were closed. The governor had declared a state of emergency. No mobile notary was driving to my father's house in a whiteout. And my father? On January 30th, he was already in the hospital. The document said it was signed at his residence. They had messed up the location. I grabbed my notebook. I wrote down the weather report. I wrote down the hospital admission records. They tried to create a miracle document, but they forgot the weather. I closed the laptop. "Bring it on." "Bennett." I whispered to the empty room. The sun began to rise over the city, casting a pale gray light on the buildings. It was the morning of the hearing, the morning of the end. I showered, dressed in my suit, and packed my bag. I put the ledger in the front pocket. I walked out of the hotel room for the last time. I didn't know if I would come back as a victor or a victim, but I knew I would not come back as the same woman. I drove to the courthouse. The sky was clear, the air crisp. As I walked up the steps, I saw the familiar gray sedan of Bennett Rowe pull up. He stepped out, looking immaculate. Marin stepped out from the passenger side. She looked pale, nervous. She saw me. She stopped. Rowe whispered something to her. She nodded, but her eyes stayed on me. She looked afraid. Good, I thought. I pushed open the heavy brass doors of the Hall of Justice. The smell of old wood and history washed over me. It was time to finish this. The morning of the hearing arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron. I sat on the edge of my hotel bed, fully dressed in my navy suit, staring at the notification that had just pinged on my phone. It was an email. The sender was a string of random alphanumeric characters, a burner address. The subject line was 3 words: Trust Amendment, Final. My thumb hovered over the screen. It was 6 in the morning. My stomach was a knot of cold acid. I tapped the icon. A PDF opened. It was a legal document, scanned at a slight angle. The header read, Second Amendment to the Gideon Hayes Living Trust. I scrolled down, my breath hitching in my throat. I, Gideon Hayes, being of sound mind, hereby revoke all prior beneficiary designations regarding Eleanor Hayes. Due to her continued estrangement and instability, she is to receive the sum of $1, the remainder of the estate, including real property and financial assets, is to be distributed solely to Marin Hayes. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was it. This was the nuclear option. I looked at the date next to the signature, January 30th, 2 days before he died. I zoomed in on the signature. It was shaky. It looked like his Panic began to rise, a dark water filling my lungs. If this was real, everything Talia and I had built, the ledger, the deleted files, the body cam footage, was irrelevant. A valid amendment superseded everything. But then I remembered the lesson I had learned over the last month. Don't trust the paperwork. I opened the file properties on my phone. I clicked on the metadata tab. Created, February 12th. Modified, February 12th. February 12th. My father died on February 1st. The document had been created 12 days after his death. I let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. They had forged it. They had created a digital file, printed it, signed it, scanned it, and were planning to ambush me with it in court. But they had been sloppy. They had left the digital fingerprints. I forwarded the email to Talia. They are going to try to kill us with this. I typed, but look at the creation date. Her reply came 1 minute later. Bring your phone. We are going to destroy them. I walked into the courtroom at 8:45. The air was heavy, smelling of floor wax and old anguish. Judge Marcus Sterling sat on the bench, a man with a face carved from granite. Marin and Bennett Rowe were already at the plaintiff's table. Bennett looked impeccable in a charcoal suit, his hair perfectly coiffed. Marin looked smaller than usual. She was wearing a high-collared gray dress. She refused to look at me. Talia squeezed my arm as we sat down. Let them play their card, she whispered. We wait. Judge Sterling banged his gavel. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. We are here for the evidentiary hearing in the matter of the estate of Gideon Hayes. The judge said, Ms. Mercer, you have filed a motion to remove the executor and compel an accounting. You may proceed. Talia stood up. She moved with a predatory grace. Your Honor, she began, her voice filling the room. This is not a case about a family disagreement. This is a case about a coordinated criminal enterprise designed to defraud a beneficiary and obstruct justice. Rowe shifted in his seat but did not object. Talia walked to the podium. She connected her laptop to the courtroom display. We have established a pattern of malice, Talia said. It began on February 3rd. The large screen flickered to life. The body cam footage appeared. The courtroom watched in silence as the video played, the officer's gun drawn. My terrified face, the humiliation on the roadside, and then the audio from the cruiser. Lady sounds like she wants her arrested today. Like, really wants it. Talia paused the video. Marin Hayes did not call the police to protect her sister, Talia said, gesturing to Marin. She called the police to create a record of instability. She attempted to weaponize law enforcement to trigger a specific clause in the trust. Talia clicked the remote. The screen changed. It was the still image from the hospital lobby. The timestamp, 9:42 a.m., while the defendant claims she was at her dying father's bedside. Talia said, she was actually in the lobby, handing a blue folder to a man who we can now identify as her attorney. Mr. Bennett Rowe. Rowe sat perfectly still, his pen poised over his legal pad. At the exact moment this handoff occurred, Talia continued. A digital contract was signed with North Pine Estate Services from an IP address registered to Mr. Rowe's office. This was not a grieving daughter hiring a caretaker. This was a pre-planned seizure of assets. Talia clicked again. The Iron Mountain rejection log appeared. And finally, Talia said, when Mr. Klein, the former attorney for the estate, realized the scrutiny was increasing, an attempt was made to delete the historical records of the estate, a rush deletion request. This is the behavior of people who are terrified of the truth. Talia turned to the judge. Your Honor, the defense has engaged in malicious prosecution, fraud, and spoliation of evidence. We ask that Marin Hayes be removed as executor immediately and that the court appoint the successor named in the will. Ms. Loretta Vance. She sat down. The judge looked at Bennett Rowe. Mr. Rowe, the judge said, you have some explaining to do. Rowe stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He looked unbothered, bored, even. Your Honor, Rowe said, his voice smooth as oil. Miss Mercer tells a very dramatic story. But it is a story built on conjecture and paranoia. He walked to the clerk's desk. He was holding a document. The truth is much simpler. Roe said, Eleanor Hayes was disinherited, not by a conspiracy, but by her father. He handed the document to the clerk. We offer into evidence Defense Exhibit A. Roe said, the Second Amendment to the Living Trust. Signed by Gideon Hayes on January 30th. I watched Marin. She was staring at her hands, her knuckles white. Roe turned to the gallery. This document revokes all prior claims. It makes Marin Hayes the sole beneficiary. It renders all of Ms. Mercer's arguments moot. Gideon Hayes made his choice. The clerk handed the document up to the judge. Judge Sterling put on his glasses. He read it in silence. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the ventilation system. Ms. Mercer? The judge asked, looking over his glasses. Have you seen this? We received a copy this morning. Your Honor, Talia said, standing up. An anonymous email. Talia walked to the bench. May I see the original? Roe handed her the paper. Talia held it up to the light. She looked at the signature. She looked at the notary stamp. Your Honor, Talia said, her voice dripping with ice. Mr. Roe claims this was signed on January 30th. That is the date on the document, Roe said, and it was notarized by a mobile notary. Talia said, a Ms. Sarah Jenkins. Correct, Roe said. She visited the house. Talia looked at the judge. Your Honor, I would like to direct the court's attention to the notary stamp. Specifically, the commission number. She read the number aloud. 024991. The judge looked at the paper. I ran this commission number this morning. Talia said, it belongs to a notary named Sarah Jenkins. However, Ms. Jenkins resides in Buffalo, New York. Roe stiffened. Furthermore, Talia said, turning to face Roe, the commission number sequence for New York notaries issued in the last year starts with 03. A number starting with 02 would have been issued 5 years ago, but Ms. Jenkins only received her commission 6 months ago. She dropped the paper on the defense table. But the most glaring error, Talia said, is not the number. It is the jurisdiction. The stamp says, State of New York. We are in Pennsylvania. A New York notary cannot notarize a document in Pennsylvania unless they have dual reciprocity, which Ms. Jenkins does not have. Roe's face did not change, but a small muscle in his jaw jumped. It is a clerical error, Roe said dismissively. The notary likely grabbed the wrong stamp. A clerical error? Talia asked. Or a forgery? Your Honor, the metadata on the digital file sent to my client shows this document was created 12 days after the decedent passed away. This is not a mistake. This is a felony. The judge stared at Roe. His face was dark. Mr. Roe, the judge said, his voice low and dangerous. Did you draft this document? I did not, Roe said. It was provided to me by the client. He threw Marin under the bus without blinking. Marin's head snapped up. She looked at Roe. Betrayal written across her face. Judge Sterling slammed his gavel. We are taking a 15-minute recess. He barked. I want this document examined. And Mr. Roe, you will not leave this building. I walked out into the hallway, my legs shaking. Talia stayed behind to argue with the clerk about the forensic protocol. I needed water. I walked toward the fountain near the elevators. Eleanor. I turned. Marin was standing there. She had followed me. Stay away from me, I said, backing up. She stepped closer. Her eyes were wild. The composed, grieving sister was gone. In her place was a woman on the edge of a cliff. You have to stop, she whispered. You are going to ruin everything. You ruined it yourself. Marin, I said, you forged the will. I didn't, she hissed. I didn't write it. He did. She jerked her head toward the courtroom. Bennett? I asked. He told me it was the only way. Marin said, her voice cracking. He said you were going to take the house. He said you were going to kick me out. He said he could fix it. So you let him frame me for drugs? I asked. You let him fake a legal document? He said it was standard practice. Marin cried. She grabbed my arm. Her fingers dug into my sleeve. Eleanor, listen to me. You need to sign the settlement. Right now. If you don't know who he works for. Who does he work for? I asked. He isn't just a lawyer, Marin whispered. The company. North Pine. It is not just debt collection, it is money laundering. If they look too deep into the accounts, if the judge orders a forensic audit. She looked over her shoulder, terrified. They will kill me. Eleanor, they will make me disappear. You have to drop the case. Please, I will give you half the money. Just stop the audit. I looked at her. I saw the fear. It was real. She wasn't the villain anymore. She was the pawn. She had invited a shark into the pool to bite me, and now she realized the shark was eating her too. I pulled my arm away. I can't stop it. Marin, I said, it is too late. You signed the papers. You made the calls. Eleanor, she pleaded. The bailiff opened the courtroom doors. Recess is over. Marin looked at me one last time, a look of pure despair, and then turned and walked back into the slaughter. I walked back in. I sat down next to Talia. She is scared. I whispered. She told me North Pine is laundering money. Talia nodded grimly. I suspected as much. That is why they fought so hard for the house. It isn't about the inheritance. It is about the books. The judge returned. He looked furious. The court calls Loretta Vance. The judge said. Loretta stood up. She walked to the witness stand. She looked small in the big chair, but her chin was high. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Ms. Vance, Talia said, you were a close friend of Gideon Hayes? For 40 years. Loretta said, did he ever discuss his estate plans with you in the final months? He did. Loretta said, he was very worried. What was he worried about? He was worried about Marin, Loretta said, looking sadly at my sister. He knew she was in trouble. He knew she was involved with bad people. He told me, if anything happens to me, watch the paperwork. Did he say anything specific about amendments? Talia asked. Loretta nodded. She spoke clearly, her voice ringing in the silence. He told me, Loretta, I have closed the book. If anyone shows up with a new will, or a new amendment, or a napkin with my signature on it after I'm gone, it is a lie. I don't trust the lawyers anymore. I only trust the ledger. Bennett Rowe stood up. Objection. Hearsay. Overruled. The judge snapped. Go on. Ms. Vance. He told me he had hidden the real records. Loretta said. He said, the executor is compromised. He appointed me as the backup because he knew Marin wouldn't be able to say no to them. Marin let out a small sob. Rowe did not look at her. Thank you. Ms. Vance, Talia said. Talia turned to the judge. Your Honor, we have the ledger, we have the testimony, and we have a forged document submitted by the defense. We ask for a directed verdict. Rowe stood up. Your Honor, this is ridiculous. A senile woman's recollection of a conversation is not evidence, and regarding the document, we request time to bring in our own handwriting expert. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Rowe, I am looking at a notary stamp for a woman who wasn't even commissioned when this document was allegedly signed. You are treading on very thin ice. I demand the production of the original ledger, Rowe shouted, losing his cool for the first time. If they claim to have a ledger, let us see it. I bet it is a forgery, too. The judge's eyes narrowed. He was watching Rowe. He seemed to notice the sweat on Rowe's forehead, the slight tremor in his hand. The court orders the document, Trust Amendment, Final, be surrendered to the custody of the clerk for forensic analysis, the judge said. And regarding the ledger, excuse me, Judge? A young clerk from the back of the room walked forward. He was holding a large manila envelope. What is this? Judge Sterling asked. It was just delivered to Chambers. Your Honor, the clerk said. By courier? It is marked, to be opened only by Judge Marcus Sterling in the event of my death. Who is it from? The judge asked. The return address is Gideon Hayes, the clerk said. A gasp went through the courtroom. I felt the hair on my arms stand up. My father. The judge took the envelope. He looked at the handwriting. He reached for his letter opener. He sliced the seal. The room was frozen. Marin was staring at the envelope as if it were a bomb. Rowe looked like he wanted to run. The judge pulled out a stack of papers. He put on his glasses. He read the first page. His eyebrows shot up. He flipped to the second page, then the third. He put the papers down. He took off his glasses. He looked at Marin, then he looked at Bennett Rowe. His expression had changed. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, terrifying authority. "This envelope," the judge said quietly, "contains a notarized affidavit from Gideon Hayes, dated January 15th. It also contains a USB drive." He held up the affidavit. In this statement, Mr. Hayes details a pattern of extortion and elder abuse by a company known as North Pine Estate Services. He details threats made against his property, and he explicitly names Bennett Rowe as the individual pressuring him to sign over his assets. Rowe's face turned gray. "Mr. Hayes also writes," the judge continued, "that he anticipated an attempt would be made to produce a fraudulent amendment. He writes, 'They have my signature on file. They will use it to steal my daughter's future.'" The judge looked at me. "He didn't just leave a ledger, Ms. Hayes. He left a confession." Judge Sterling turned to the bailiff. "Lock the doors," he ordered. "No one leaves this room." Rowe stood up. "Your Honor, I object. This is highly irregular. I have rights. Sit down." "Mr. Rowe," the judge roared, "you have the right to remain silent, and I suggest you use it." The judge turned to the court reporter. "This hearing is suspended. I am referring this entire matter, including the contents of this envelope and the forged amendment, to the district attorney's office for immediate criminal investigation." He pointed a finger at Rowe. "Mr. Rowe, you are in contempt. Bailiffs, take him into custody. And Miss Hayes," the judge looked at Marin. Marin stood up, trembling. "You are removed as executor effective immediately." The judge said, "The court appoints Loretta Vance as interim trustee. You will remain in the jurisdiction pending the police investigation into the false report and the forgery. It is over." The judge said. He banged the gavel. Pandemonium broke out. Two bailiffs moved toward the defense table. Bennett Rowe tried to shove his papers into his briefcase, but a bailiff grabbed his arm. He was hauled away. Shouting about jurisdiction and entrapment, Marin did not move. She stood there, looking at the empty space where Rowe had been. She looked lost. I stood up. My legs felt like wood. Talia hugged me. "We did it." She whispered, "We got him." I looked at Marin. A female bailiff was gently guiding her by the elbow. Marin looked across the room at me. Her eyes were wide and wet, filled with a mixture of shame and relief. She had lost the money. She had lost the house. But the shark was gone. I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a deep, exhausting sadness. I walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was already filling with reporters who had sniffed out the drama. "Ms. Hayes, is it true your sister forged the will?" "Ms. Hayes, what was in the envelope?" I pushed past them. I needed air. I walked out the front doors of the courthouse and down the wide stone steps. The sun was fully up now, bright and blinding. I stood on the sidewalk, breathing in the cold air. It smelled of exhaust and freedom. I had won. The house was safe. The money was safe. My name was cleared. But as I reached into my purse for my keys, I froze. Across the street, parked in a loading zone, was a black sedan. It was idling. The windows were tinted dark, but the driver's side window was rolled down an inch. I saw a hand. I saw a phone raised. The lens was pointed directly at me. Click. The window rolled up. The sedan pulled away, merging seamlessly into the traffic. I watched it go. Marin had said it. It is not just debt collection. It is money laundering. Bennett Rowe was in custody. But Bennett Rowe had bosses. North Pine was a shell. But shells had owners. My father had left me the ledger. He had left me the money. But he had also left me a target on my back. I walked to my car. I unlocked the door and got in. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel. I could run. I could take the $75,000, no, the $1 million now, and moved to a beach in Mexico. I could disappear. I looked at the passenger seat. My notebook was there, the one where I had written war. I thought about the man taking my picture. They thought I was just a medical office manager. They thought I was a grieving daughter who would crumble under pressure. They were wrong. I started the engine. I put the car in gear. I wasn't running. I was just getting started. I pulled out into the street, following the black sedan. Thank you so much for listening to Police Pulled Me Over with Guns Drawn. My sister reported my car stolen to steal my inheritance. This story has been a journey through betrayal, gaslighting, and the ultimate vindication of truth. I would love to hear your thoughts on Eleanor's victory and the dark road that still lies ahead for her. Do you think she should chase the black sedan or take the money and run? Let me know in the comments below. And please tell me where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice served cold. Until next time, keep your eyes on the ledger.